Hello and welcome to Attacking Third and Title IX Tuesdays. I am Sandra and Herrera, joined today as always by my colleague and co-host Lisa Roman. Today we're so excited to be joined by an incredible sports executive and trailblazer. Also creeping back a little bit towards our soccer roots is Attacking Third. We're joined today by the CEO of LA28 hosting the Summer Olympics in 2028, formerly CEO of Soccer United Marketing, and of course, a former soccer goalkeeper. We're welcoming Kathy Carter to the show. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you. I appreciate being here, and thanks for all you guys are doing.
Yeah, we've been doing these segments for Title IX. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of Title IX, and as we sort of ventured into other areas of sport, we were so excited to sit down and chat with you because we figured it was a way to us to get back to our soccer roots in terms of these Title IX Tuesday segments. So we're so excited to chat with you, not only for your incredible executive achievements, but because you are a former soccer player and going to be running these Summer Olympics in LA28, and of course, we at Attacking Third love soccer. And for the Title IX Tuesday series honoring the 50th anniversary of Title IX, that means so much and so many things to so many different people, depending on who you speak with. But to sort of kick things off here for you, in your own words, what is Title IX and what does it mean to you?
Well, I don't think I'd be sitting here today if not for Title IX. I mean, I'm a classic Title IX baby. And growing up where I did, which was just outside of Washington, D.C., let's say an early adopter of opportunity for young girls, I actually was able to play and really never knew a time where I wasn't able to participate in sport. And that was an incredible part of my personal and professional journey.
So for you as a former soccer player, not just as a little girl, like so many women have played growing up, but you played at William and Mary, a goalie. So we already know that you're strong, you're tough, you're a fighter. We know how intense goalies are. But for you, Title IX, how did it impact your life as an athlete, especially collegiately, being able to play?
Well, I might back up because, I truly am. I mean, I was Title IX passed in 1972, and so I was 3. So everybody can do the math and figure out how old I am. But suffice it to say, by the time I actually started to play, and really as a young kid, my 2 sports were soccer, and I dabbled a little bit in basketball. And I don't remember it as much in soccer, but certainly in basketball, where at the time when I started to get into high school and started to play on the varsity team, we still had hand-me-down uniforms from the men's team. So there was still some inequities as it related to what we experienced. And truly, we certainly didn't always have the best time slot for practice, whether that was in soccer or in basketball, but we always had the opportunity to play. And so when I think back to that journey, and then suddenly as a young player, at the time that I went to William and Mary and went to college, and William and Mary was one of the top programs in women's Division I collegiate soccer. I went back and took a look a number of years ago, and you think that that was such a great period of time. But at the time, I think there were 20 or 30, maybe 40 real Division I programs, but it was a very limited number of programs. And today, you look at the number of Division I programs and the opportunities for girls to continue their collegiate career. And I think it's more than 200 that actually have field Division I funded programs. So, I mean, just the maturation of soccer as again, one that I'm probably a little bit more familiar with in the collegiate space, I think that is a direct impact of Title IX. So again, I actually was able to take advantage of the opportunity. And I think what we've seen over really the 50 years is just how that lens has opened, and the aperture is much wider than it was when I was going through. So the number of girls that now have opportunity, again, whether it be in soccer or in other sports, is really significantly larger today than it was even back then.
And when we take a look at your experience and sort of share that with our listeners, you've worked extensively in soccer as an executive, specifically experience with the 1994 World Cup, MLS, founding member marketing for MLS, as well as U.S. soccer. But when in hindsight, when looking through the executive part of your career as a young soccer player, were your personal goals to essentially work in soccer, in sport? What essentially led you to these types of roles specifically?
That wasn't really the pathway, because I don't think that anybody knew that there was a pathway. I think we were making it up as we went along. But what was an opportunity is, and I think this is where you see the impact that collegiate sports can have on the actual athletes. And I think the NCAA has historically had a commercial that they talk about how many of their athletes go pro, but the majority of NCAA athletes actually go pro in something other than their sport. But what athletics actually provides is an opportunity for you to get greater influence or engagement in potential opportunities. And so, as a young student athlete, one of the alumni of William and Mary is the late great Mark McCormick, founder of IMG, what is now many iterations since that period of time, but really at the forefront of sports marketing and the idea of sport as truly a business. And so, in his efforts to always pay it forward, he would always come back to the college and share some of his learnings. And it's something that, as a young athlete, to hear that there was a business of sport, there wasn't. And I remember vividly sitting next to a football player. I can't remember what his name was, but I just remembered this really big guy sitting next to me. We both walked out saying, "That's what we want to do." But at the time, how do you actually create an opportunity in an industry that at that period of time was rather small? And so it was an aspiration, but I certainly didn't have an idea of whether or not there would be opportunity. So that was sort of, like I said, an aspiration, and it's obviously worked out pretty well for me, but it wasn't a foregone conclusion that was the direction or a destination that I would actually be able to achieve.
Sometimes that's how you end up in the best places. You're not expecting it, and you veer off down a path career wise, personally wise, professionally wise, and you end up in a certain area of your field. So if you started with LA28 in 2018 as the chief revenue officer and then promoted to CEO. So during your climb in these executive ranks through different companies and now with LA28, what have you learned about yourself as a leader, and how does that compare to your male coworkers?
Well, I tend to look only on the journey that I'm on as opposed to necessarily compare it. You can look back at your journey, and you can look back at whether it's, what's written on diversity and inclusion. And they often talk about being invited to the dance or and actually being asked to dance as the difference between being at the table or actually being able to participate. And I was actually really fortunate, no different than most women who have risen through the executive ranks. I think that we've always had to come in better prepared and do a heck of a lot more work, perhaps, than our male colleagues. And that's not to suggest that men aren't prepared, but there's just there was always, as I was growing up in the industry, a different standard. And, I just have always chosen to look at that. At the time, I was like, well, why am I working so much harder? But I realized that actually that became a part of my superpower. Because as a result of the sheer volume and breadth of what I had to do in order to be able to be at the table and be seen as credible, I actually had an opportunity to dig a lot deeper across the industry. And so that actually prepared me in a far different way. There's an old adage of fake it until you make it, but quite frankly, I had to do the work, so I didn't have to fake as much because I actually had to know. And so I think that's been a part of the journey for me personally. And I think so many of my peers and my female colleagues that we've sat around the table many, many times and shared our stories, our war stories, so to speak. I don't know how it is for the men because, quite frankly, I'm not a guy. So I think that they have their own journeys and they've got their own war stories. But I will say there is a really, really interesting and terrific evolution that's occurred for women in business, and certainly in the sports business. It was a very lonely place when I first started out many years ago. And I think we have adopted something that men have in second nature. And I think team sports certainly provides some of that training for all of us. I've got a gaggle of women that I consider to be, in some cases, those that keep me grounded, and in some cases, those that lift me up. Whether that is the women who are sitting around board tables themselves, and they actually can provide a lot of encouragement as we face challenges. And I think that was something that was missing years ago. There just weren't as many women around the table. And I think we are doing a far better job of putting more and more women in the main seat, in the C-suite. And there's just a better group of women that we can depend on to help and support as we go through the journey.
Just sort of maybe staying with that, the evolution, right? You're talking about of this timeline, starting as a player, now as a high-ranking female executive, mentioning how maybe there were moments throughout the trajectory of your career where you were maybe the only woman in the room, or there were moments where you felt lonely. We've had a lot of different conversations with other women in the space of sport, and we talked a little bit about those moments, if there were ever moments of facing the gender discriminations, or moments where sort of had to work through those difficult times. What did you learn from those moments, if you found yourself faced with them?
Well, I mean, listen, you don't get to certain levels without being punched in the face a couple times. And, we all have great plans, but to pull an old adage out from Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face. So I don't know. I mean, I think that we are all a collection of the experiences that we've gone through, and whether that is through the challenges that we face on the climb, on moments that we've been put into. I think what we are able to identify, and certainly I know from my own perspective, what I've learned, and I'm not always great at doing this, but certainly what I've learned is to take a minute and not react in the moment. But to give it some breadth, to recognize, because there's often a larger picture at play than the individual moment and situation. But you also need to find what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And what I'm really encouraged by now is different than perhaps I and my peer set, what we may had to have walked through to get to the levels that we've achieved. I think that the younger women today coming through, I'm hopeful that they don't have that the normalization of behavior has changed and the expectations are different. And I think that's a real asset for them. And my hope is that the journey is even smoother, although there'll be bumps because that's the nature of the journey. But I hope that we've been able to provide some opportunities for it to be that much easier. Or the challenges will be in different places, let's say.
Yeah, that's a good qualifier there. There'll still be challenges, but different places. And as you mentioned, thankfully, like after 50 years of Title IX, it has been more common to have women in sport, in places of power, in positions of power, in those leadership roles. It's less of a headline to have a female CEO or whatever role that may be. So how have you seen the perception of women in powerful positions change throughout your career?
Well, I think we're still dealing with, and I think we've seen that, through even our own political landscape, that we're still dealing with a level of unconscious bias. And I think and I think the key thing is and I always talk about being on the edge of being patient and having an impatience. And that's a razor's edge of where we all need to be. And so I think that we're making progress, but we have not achieved complete equality. And again, that may not be individual, but I think that's collective. And until we have, and you could say the same thing in terms of representation of Black Americans as an example. I mean, there's opportunity for us to strive to achieve better results and to have a pure reflection of the society that we represent. So I don't think that, I think that's an aspirational destination across the board. And I think it's something that, but we're still fighting a lot of unconscious bias or in some cases flat out bias. And so I think there's always opportunity and room for growth.
You've worked alongside, I'm sure, with so many women, having, been within this space for so long, whether it was in a position as a leader for, amongst other women, or just being surrounded by women in the workplace. In these discussions, there's also been that we've been having on Attacking Third, where there's also been like a little bit of chatter about the women that you work alongside with sometime in your workspace, and how they have impacted you, or what guests have learned from other phenomenal women in the space. So for you, who are maybe some women in the space that you have either looked up to or learned from a little bit, perhaps?
Oh my goodness, that list is really, really long. But I'll go back just a step. First of all, I try to learn every day. And I think I've been very fortunate. I'm surrounded at LA28 by some incredible women and are in leadership and executive ranks. And I think we've done a really good job of finding really terrific talent that is pushing the ball forward for us. And so, that's a group that I learn from every day. And whether that is a recent woman that we brought aboard, Michelle Schwartz, or Amy Gleason, our head of marketing, to many of the people in our commercial space, like a woman by the name of Zaleen Jean Mohammed or Kate Cash. We've got Ann Rodriguez. I mean, the list, quite frankly, goes on. Outside of the industry, and kind of where I realized the impact that you can have on somebody, I actually started when I was back in my college playing days. And I was very fortunate, and I've said this before in other discussions and other speeches or things like that, but as a young player, I was before my junior year in college, and one of the women that had graduated before me, a friend of mine, who happens to be Jill Ellis, and she took took time during that summer when we happened to both be coaching, ironically, at her dad's camps, to spend a lot of time talking and helping me start to identify the mental aspect of your playing and how you show up. And I'll never forget, that was the best season I ever had in college. And I credit a lot of that to sort of the mental work we did. And it wasn't like we were thinking that was mental work, but now that I look back, it really was. So you see somebody like that, and then you see how she's achieved such great success, and you're not at all surprised. But and then there's many other. I could go on for the entire length of this podcast, whether it's I was just in Boston at the Sloan Conference that was founded by Jessica Gelman, whether it's the woman who is at FanDuel, running FanDuel, Amy Howe, or good friends of mine that were just recently recognized at the Wise Women of the Year Awards, and Elizabeth Lindsay or Joanne Neal. I mean, literally the amount of women that are out there to support each other is really, honestly, really incredible.
Knowing all that you've learned from women ahead of you and women that you work with, what is one thing you're hoping to pass down to the women that are around you, that you're hoping they're learning from you?
Well, I think that we can lead. I think we are still in a process of destigmatizing that and identifying that women truly can have a mark, not just on our work, on our families, on our communities, but can be leaders truly in what we want tomorrow to look like. And so if I give one woman an opportunity to believe that they have a shot, I think that to me is success. And if we can make it one step easier for them to achieve the mantle, whatever that mantle is, and to own that destination for themselves in a way that they own it, as opposed to it happening to them, I think that to me is a part of the journey.
Kathy, we've had a lot of fun with these interviews that we've been doing for Title IX Tuesdays, and we've towards the end of our episodes, we've liked to have some lighter-hearted questions or reflective type questions. So for you and your background, we thought it could be fun to maybe chat a little bit, about Olympics and the Olympic sports that come into play during the Summer Olympics specifically. So with your background is soccer, I'm going to take that one away from you. Okay.
Oh man. Okay.
Is there another Summer Olympic sport that is your favorite to watch? And if you could compete in a non-soccer Summer Olympic sport, what event would yours be?
Yeah, let me tell you. I'll tell you, one of the greatest experiences I've had was actually sitting with Janet Evans during the U.S. swimming trials. And I had such an appreciation as we were standing up there and we were cheering loudly for one of the young swimmers. I was, I just thought to myself, the swimming, what an unbelievable sport, and what these athletes are able to do. So that I got to tell you is pretty spectacular. But honestly, when you see the power of athletes and their voices, and now I'm getting a chance to meet and learn from so many of the Olympians, it's so cool. They are such amazing people, let alone athletes. And we just had a bunch of them in Park City as we were entertaining people for the Winter Games. And you realize how committed they are to pay it forward themselves. So what else would I want to play? I probably basketball, but I'm too darn short to be any good at it. And well, let's be honest, I'm too old to think that I could ever get back on the field or on the field of play on any of the sports. But as you're right, soccer is my sport. That would have been my number one. But I'd say basketball. I love the 3v3, by the way, which was new.
Yeah.
And obviously, we think that there's so many other great things that go on during the games.
Well, we hope you get out on the court, the field, something like that. As you mentioned, I mean, Olympians are so cool. Athletes are so cool in general. And here at Attacking Third, Sandra and I, we mainly cover the NWSL, the Women's Professional League in the United States, and 2 new expansion clubs coming in California. Now, you are in LA, and that's where your work is mainly. But you mentioned that you're pretty good friends with Jill Ellis, who is with San Diego Wave FC. Mm-hmm. So NWSL season is about to start, the regular season. Who are you cheering for? Which team are you supporting? LA, Angel City, or San Diego?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will tell you, I actually really like the team that Jill's put together, and that I think they're what you would expect. Obviously, the soccer IQ that they have in San Diego is probably off the charts, and so I really think they're going to come out on the field pretty hot. But how can you beat what Angel City is doing on the field, we think, but certainly in the community? And so just, massive props to them. Growing up as you mentioned, as one of the founders of Major League Soccer, what I realized is when you're in the seat and you haven't actually been able to grow up with the team, you always root for the home team. So I'm going with whoever's at home is going to be my number one choice. So how about that for a cop out of picking one?
I love that.
I gave you some nuggets just in terms of what I liked about what both of them are doing. Now, I do think San Diego is going to be great in the community as well, not to take away from either one, but I'm particularly keen on what they're doing on the field in San Diego.
All right.
I love that. We got a supportive answer for both the community aspects and the soccer aspect. So we'll take it. I love that. Let's close it out here. In terms of Title IX, closing out the episode here, we've come a long way in the last 50 years in terms of gender equality, but as women, we know there's always so much work to be done. How much further do you feel that we need to go, and what are some of your dreams or hopes for the next 50 years here?
Well, I mean, I hope someday we drop gender and we just talk about equality in its totality, and whether that be gender or race or disability. We've got the Paralympics coming as well in 2028. And I think that similarly is an underserved. But for purposes of today, my hope is that we no longer have to talk about gender equality. That in fact, it's just so ingrained in everything we do that it's not a surprise when a woman is CEO, or I hope one day when a woman is the president of the United States. But in fact, that is just acceptable in a way that, of course, as opposed to it being a news story. That being said, I think we're all going to continue to work like crazy until that day comes. And my hope is that there's a day where we no longer talk about gender, but we just talk about equality and continue that journey for all underrepresented people in both our country and ultimately across the world.
I love that. Close it out. Kathy Carter, thank you so much for joining and sharing a bit of your story with us. We also want to thank our listeners for joining along. You can follow us on Twitter at Attacking Third for more. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere you listen to your podcast shows. We're also available as videos. Subscribe to youtube.com/Attacking Third. And we'll be back next Tuesday with our final Title IX Tuesday episode. For Sandra, Herrera, Lisa Roman, and Kathy Carter, this was Attacking Third.